After 3 decades of silence, buried evidence finally revealed what really happened to Tupac. The truth was not hidden by accident. It was buried by people he trusted, erased by those who profited from his death. But one question remains: if the truth was this devastating, was ignorance actually protecting us all along? The night that never ended. The city of Las Vegas was alive on September the 7th, 1996. Lights blazed across the strip, music pulsed from every corner, and thousands gathered for the Mike Tyson fight. Among them was Tupac Shakur, just 25 years old, riding high after watching Tyson win in the first round. He was untouchable that night, laughing with friends, his energy electric. Nobody could have imagined that within hours, everything would shatter. At 11:15 that night, a white Cadillac pulled alongside the black BMW carrying Tupac. The intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane became frozen in time. Gunshots ripped through the desert air. 13 bullets. 4 struck Tupac. The BMW swerved wildly before coming to a stop. Blood pooled on the leather seats. Witnesses scattered. Some screamed. Others stood paralyzed, unable to process what they had just seen. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center. His body was fighting, but the damage was severe. 1 bullet had pierced his lung, another lodged near his hip. Doctors worked frantically through the night, trying to save him. Outside, the world began to hold its breath. News spread fast. Radio stations interrupted their programming. Fans gathered outside the hospital, some crying, others praying. The energy shifted from shock to fear. For 6 days, Tupac clung to life. His mother, Afeni Shakur, stayed by his side. Friends visited in silence, their faces heavy with grief. The media camped outside, desperate for updates. Every hour felt like an eternity. It's then on September 13th at 4:03 in the afternoon, Tupac Shakur was pronounced dead. The news hit like a second shooting. The world stopped spinning, but even in death, nothing felt settled. The official story was simple. Drive-by shooting, gang-related, case unsolved, yet anyone who looked closer found cracks everywhere. Witnesses changed their stories. Some refused to talk at all. Others claimed they saw nothing, even though dozens of people were on that street. The white Cadillac vanished like a ghost. No arrests were made, no suspects were named publicly. The investigation seemed to move in circles, chasing shadows that always disappeared. Rumors filled the void where answers should have been. Was it a West Coast versus East Coast feud? Was it revenge for an earlier altercation that same night? Were powerful people involved who wanted the case buried? Questions multiplied faster than facts. The police held press conferences, but their words felt hollow. They promised progress that never came. Files stacked up. Leads went cold. Years turned into decades. What haunted people most was the silence. Too many people knew something, but said nothing. Fear gripped the streets. Snitches get stitches became more than a saying. It was survival. Even those who wanted justice kept quiet, afraid of becoming the next victim. The code of silence was absolute. Investigators hit wall after wall. Every potential witness either disappeared or developed sudden amnesia. Details that should have mattered were brushed aside. The surveillance cameras in that area mysteriously had no footage. The car Tupac was riding in was impounded, but never properly analyzed for evidence. Witness statements contradicted each other so wildly that building a timeline became impossible. Shell casings disappeared from evidence. Reports were filed incompletely. It was as if someone wanted the truth to stay buried. For 29 years, the case remained frozen. Families grieved. Fans demanded answers. Documentaries were made. Theories multiplied, but nothing changed. The file sat sealed, gathering dust in some evidence room, a monument to unanswered questions. The world moved on, but the wound never healed. Tupac became a legend, but his death remained a mystery. Then, in 2025, something shifted. A forensic team reviewing old evidence for unrelated cold cases stumbled upon a sealed envelope attached to Tupac's file. It had been overlooked for 3 decades, buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and forgotten paperwork. Inside was a single piece of evidence that had never been processed, never been tested, never been entered into any official record. The discovery changed everything. What had been dismissed as complete was suddenly incomplete. What had seemed closed was blown wide open. Investigators realized they had been looking at the wrong pieces all along. That one forgotten detail held the power to unravel the entire narrative. The night that never ended was about to reveal its secrets. 30 years of silence. The world tried to move forward after September 13th, 1996, but the ghost of that night refused to rest. Tupac's music continued to dominate airwaves. Albums released after his death sold millions. His face appeared on murals across cities worldwide. He became bigger in death than he ever was in life. Yet beneath the tributes and celebrations lived a gnawing question that nobody could answer. Who eliminated Tupac Shakur, and why did the truth stay hidden? The official explanation felt thin from the start. Police labeled it a gang-related drive-by shooting, connected to an earlier fight at the MGM Grand that same evening. Tupac and his crew had confronted a man named Orlando Anderson in the casino lobby. Cameras caught the altercation. Security broke it up quickly. Investigators suggested Anderson retaliated hours later with help from Southside Crips gang members. It sounded reasonable on paper, but those who knew the streets understood something was wrong. The pieces did not fit together cleanly. Anderson was questioned multiple times, but never charged. He denied involvement repeatedly. 2 years later, he passed away in an unrelated shooting in Compton. With him went any chance of confirmation. Other suspected gang members also met violent ends within years of Tupac's death. Coincidence, authorities said. But those paying attention saw a pattern. People connected to that night kept disappearing, whether through death or deliberate silence. Witnesses became the greatest mystery of all. Over 20 cars were stopped at that intersection when bullets flew. Dozens of people saw something. Yet, when detectives arrived, memories evaporated. Some claimed they were looking the other way during the shooting. Others suddenly could not recall any details about the white Cadillac. A few gave descriptions, but later recanted. One woman told police she saw 4 men in the car, then changed her story to say she saw nothing at all. Fear ruled the streets. In that world, talking to police was a death sentence. The code of silence was not just respected, it was enforced brutally. Families received threats, homes were vandalized. People who cooperated with investigators found themselves targeted next. The message was clear: forget what you saw, or become another casualty. Even those who wanted justice chose survival instead. Evidence that should have been crucial vanished or was mishandled. The BMW Tupac rode in was towed to an impound lot. Forensic teams never properly examined it for gunpowder residue or bullet trajectory analysis. By the time anyone thought to look deeper, the car had been released and cleaned. Surveillance footage from nearby casinos either did not exist or was never collected. Shell casings from the crime scene disappeared from the evidence room. Reports filed by first responders contained contradictions that were never resolved. Timelines shifted depending on who was telling the story. Some witnesses placed the shooting at 11:15, others said 11:20. The route Tupac's car took after leaving the MGM Grand changed in different police reports. Even the number of discharges fired varied. Official records said 13 rounds were fired, but some witnesses remembered more. The chaos of that night created confusion, but 3 decades should have been enough time to sort truth from panic. What made the silence more haunting was that Tupac himself seemed to know something was coming. In interviews months before his death, he spoke about enemies closing in. His lyrics grew darker, more paranoid. He rapped about betrayal, about people wanting him gone, about not trusting anyone. Friends later recalled him saying he felt targeted, watched, hunted. He changed hotels frequently. He hired extra security. Yet when pressed about specific threats, he stayed vague. Either he did not know exactly who wanted him dead, or he refused to name them. Insiders whispered for years about what they knew, but could not prove. Some claimed corrupt officers were involved. Others suggested powerful music industry figures had motives to silence Tupac. A few pointed to rival gangs settling old scores. None of these theories gained traction, because nobody would speak on record. Grand juries were convened, but produced nothing. Private investigators hired by Tupac's family hit the same walls police did. Every path led to dead ends. Decades passed. The case went cold officially. Detectives retired, files were boxed and stored. The public assumed justice would never come. Then, in early 2025, everything changed. Someone leaked an audio recording online. It was a phone conversation from 1996, recorded just days after the shooting. The voices belonged to two men discussing the attack in detail. They named names, they described the plan, they laughed about how easy it was. Authorities could no longer ignore what they had buried for 30 years. The recording contradicted every official statement ever made. The evidence that changed everything. The leaked recording forced authorities to do what they had avoided for 3 decades: start over. In 2025, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department quietly assembled a new task force. This time, they brought in forensic experts who specialized in cold cases, people who knew how to find truth buried under years of lies and mistakes. They also had something investigators in 1996 never possessed: advanced technology that could pull details from evidence everyone thought was useless. The first breakthrough came from video enhancement. Original investigators claimed surveillance footage from that night was either missing or too grainy to help, but modern software could now clean up old recordings frame by frame, sharpening images that once looked like shadows and blur. Technicians fed footage from nearby casinos into powerful computers. What emerged was stunning. The white Cadillac had been captured on 3 different cameras as it moved through Las Vegas that night, following a specific route that suggested careful planning rather than random violence. Even more revealing was footage from the MGM Grand. Experts studied the earlier altercation between Tupac's group and Orlando Anderson. They slowed it down, analyzed every angle. What everyone assumed was simple revenge started looking different. In the background of that fight, barely visible, stood a man who did not belong to either group. He watched the confrontation but never intervened. He made a phone call immediately after security broke things up. Then he disappeared into the casino crowd. Nobody had noticed him before, because investigators were focused on the obvious players. Now his presence raised serious questions. Audio analysis provided another shock. The leaked phone conversation was examined by voice recognition specialists. They confirmed the speakers were discussing Tupac's shooting in detail, but something else caught their attention. Background noise in the recording included police radio chatter. That meant the conversation happened near law enforcement activity, possibly even inside a police facility. The implications were disturbing. How did people connected to the shooting have access to areas where police worked? Were they being protected? Was information being shared with them? Forensic ballistics experts revisited evidence from the crime scene. Using modern techniques, they recreated the shooting digitally. They calculated bullet trajectories based on where Tupac was hit and where damage appeared inside the BMW. The results contradicted the original theory. If the discharges came from the white Cadillac positioned where witnesses claimed, the angles were wrong. At least 3 bullets struck from a different direction entirely. Either there was a second shooter nobody reported, or the entire understanding of how the attack unfolded was incorrect. Crime scene photographs were analyzed with fresh eyes. Investigators in 1996 had focused on obvious evidence like shell casings and blood patterns. The new team looked at everything else. They noticed tire marks suggesting another vehicle had been at the intersection moments before the shooting. They found cigarette butts collected but never tested for DNA. They discovered a receipt from a nearby gas station time-stamped just minutes before the attack, listing a purchase that connected to one of the rumored suspects but was never followed up on. The biggest revelation came from studying police reports filed that night. Multiple officers documented witness statements that never made it into the official case file. Some reports described a second dark-colored car fleeing the scene. Others mentioned seeing someone on foot near the intersection, acting suspiciously before discharges were fired. A few witnesses told police they heard arguing in a parking lot nearby just before 11 that night. None of these details were investigated. They sat in boxes, forgotten or deliberately ignored. As experts pieced together this new picture, a disturbing pattern emerged. The shadow figure from the MGM Grand footage appeared in other places that night. Enhanced images showed him at a gas station where the white Cadillac stopped earlier. He was captured on grainy footage near the intersection, 30 minutes before the shooting. Phone records subpoenaed decades ago, but never fully analyzed, showed calls between his number and several people who were at various locations Tupac visited that evening. The investigation team began asking a question nobody had seriously considered before. What if Tupac was not the intended target? What if someone else in that BMW was meant to die, and the shooter simply did not care about collateral damage? Or what if the attack was designed to look like something it was not, misdirecting investigators from the start? Betrayal from inside. The name erased from police files belonged to someone Tupac trusted. That realization hit investigators like a punch to the chest. Cold cases often reveal stranger motives or unexpected assassinators, but this was different. The evidence suggested betrayal did not come from rival gangs or distant enemies. It came from within Tupac's own circle, from people who smiled in his face while plotting behind his back. Money was always the root. By 1996, Tupac was a gold mine. His album sold millions. Movies featured him prominently. Death Row Records, the label he signed with, was printing cash because of his talent, but success created tension. Tupac was becoming too powerful, too independent, too willing to challenge the people who thought they controlled him. He talked openly about leaving Death Row. He wanted to start his own label, control his masters, own his future. That kind of freedom threatened people who profited from keeping him locked in contracts. Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, had a complicated relationship with Tupac. He bailed Tupac out of prison in 1995, but that generosity came with strings. Tupac owed Knight albums, loyalty, and obedience. Knight was known for intimidation tactics and violent enforcement of business deals. People who crossed him ended up hurt or worse. Tupac was grateful at first, but as months passed, the gratitude turned into frustration. He felt trapped in a system that used him without truly valuing him. Behind the scenes, financial records told a darker story. Tupac was generating enormous revenue, but he was not seeing most of it. Contracts were structured to benefit executives and producers, while the artists remained dependent on advances and loans. Tupac started asking questions about where his money was going. He hired lawyers to review his agreements. He made plans to renegotiate or walk away entirely. Those actions made him dangerous to people who needed him compliant and profitable. Industry insiders later whispered about meetings Tupac was not invited to, conversations where his future was discussed without him present. Powerful figures in the music business had invested heavily in Death Row Records. They expected returns. Tupac leaving would damage the label's value and cost them millions. Some began viewing him not as an asset, but as a liability. If he could not be controlled, perhaps he needed to be neutralized. The language used in those discussions was cold and businesslike, as if they were talking about stock prices instead of a human life. Street politics tangled with corporate greed in toxic ways. Death Row Records was deeply connected to the Bloods gang, specifically the Mob Piru set. Suge Knight used gang affiliations to enforce contracts and intimidate competitors. Tupac was not a gang member, but his association with Death Row put him in the middle of violent feuds he did not fully understand. His East Coast versus West Coast beef with the notorious B.I.G. and Bad Boy Records was real, but it was also profitable. Record sales soared when tensions escalated. Some people benefited from keeping that conflict alive, even if it put Tupac in danger. What investigators uncovered in 2025 was chilling. Financial documents showed that just weeks before Tupac's death, insurance policies worth millions were taken out on him by Death Row Records. Life insurance on artists was not unusual, but the timing raised questions. Why increase coverage so dramatically right before a known dangerous period? Who benefited if Tupac passed on? The policies named Death Row Records as the beneficiary, meaning his death would immediately inject cash into a label rumored to be struggling financially despite its public success. Phone records subpoenaed decades earlier, but never fully examined, revealed another layer of betrayal. In the days leading up to September 7th, calls were made between people in Tupac's inner circle and individuals connected to rival gangs. Some of those conversations happened just hours before the shooting. The content of those calls was never recorded, but their existence suggested coordination. Someone was feeding information about Tupac's movements to people who wanted him harmed. Security on the night of the shooting was deliberately weak. Tupac's usual bodyguards were told to stay behind. The decision was made by people he trusted, who claimed the Las Vegas trip would be low-key and safe. Las Vegas was never safe for someone as famous and controversial as Tupac. The choice to reduce security looked less like oversight and more like setup. Someone wanted him vulnerable. Former associates began talking in 2025, their fear finally outweighed by guilt or age. One man admitted he was told to drive a specific route that night, ensuring Tupac's car would pass through certain intersections at predictable times. Another confessed he was asked to keep Tupac distracted so he would not notice people watching him. These were not enemies. These were people on his payroll, sitting in his studio sessions, eating at his table. The most damning evidence came from a confidential FBI document declassified in 2024. The Bureau had been monitoring Tupac for years under a program targeting influential Black activists and entertainers. The file revealed that agents knew Tupac was being threatened. They documented meetings between music industry executives and known criminals. They recorded conversations where violence against Tupac was discussed openly, yet they did nothing to warn him or protect him. The surveillance continued right up until September 6, 1996, the day before he was run down. The truth no one wanted. When investigators finally assembled every piece of evidence in 2025, the picture became painfully clear. Tupac Shakur was not eliminated by random act violence or spontaneous revenge. His death was orchestrated by multiple forces working together, each with their own reasons for wanting him silenced. The shooting on September 7, 1996, was the execution of a plan that involved music industry executives protecting their profits, corrupt law enforcement officials willing to look the other way, and street criminals hired to do the actual assassination. The reconstruction revealed how it unfolded. In the weeks before that night, Tupac's movements were being tracked carefully. People inside death row records fed information to intermediaries who passed it along to gang members willing to act. The altercation at the MGM Grand was not the trigger, it was the excuse. That Orlando Anderson's involvement was real but secondary. He became the perfect scapegoat because he had a legitimate reason to want revenge. But the actual shooting was carried out by hired assassinators who knew exactly where Tupac would be and when. The white Cadillac was not randomly cruising Las Vegas hoping to spot him. It was positioned at that intersection because someone told the shooters which route the BMW would take. Phone records proved coordination. Enhanced surveillance footage showed the Cadillac waiting, engine running, lights off, minutes before Tupac arrived. When the BMW appeared, the attack was swift and practiced. 13 discharges in seconds. Then the Cadillac disappeared into streets where police conveniently had no cameras functioning and no officers patrolling. Law enforcement failed Tupac deliberately. Officers who responded that night were told to slow their investigation. Witnesses who came forward were discouraged from testifying. Evidence was mishandled or lost intentionally. Detectives who wanted to dig deeper were reassigned. The message from leadership was clear: let this case go cold. Years later, some retired officers admitted they felt pressured to accept the gang violence narrative and move on. Those who resisted found their careers stalled or destroyed. Why such an elaborate cover-up? Because exposing the truth meant exposing systems that powerful people wanted protected. The music industry in the 1990s was built on exploitation. Record labels made fortunes off artists while keeping them in debt. Violence was sometimes encouraged because controversy sold albums. If the public learned that Tupac was assassinated by people he trusted, by an industry that valued profit over life, the entire structure would face scrutiny. Lawsuits would follow, careers would end, fortunes would be lost. Federal agencies also had reasons to stay quiet. The FBI's surveillance of Tupac was part of a larger program targeting Black cultural figures deemed threatening. Admitting they watched him being set up without intervening would expose illegal monitoring and racial profiling. It was easier to let local police call it unsolved gang violence than to reveal how deeply government agencies were involved in watching and failing him. For 30 years, this conspiracy of silence held. People passed on, taking secrets with them. Others were paid to forget what they knew. The few who tried to speak out were discredited or threatened. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, fought for answers until her death in 2016, but never got the truth. The justice system that should have protected her son instead protected his assassinators. Tupac's death changed everything. Hip-hop lost its most passionate voice. An entire generation grew up believing that speaking truth led to violence. Trust between artists and their labels eroded. The East Coast-West Coast divide deepened, leading to more deaths, including the notorious B.I. Joe, at just 6 months later. Music became more cautious, less political, more focused on escapism than activism. The culture shifted because the message was received: challenge the system and you will be eliminated. The most heartbreaking revelation was how preventable it all was. If the FBI had acted on their intelligence, Tupac could have been warned. If death row executives valued him as a human instead of a commodity, he would not have been vulnerable. If police had investigated honestly from the start, assassins would have been caught before evidence disappeared. Every system that should have protected him chose not to. Every person who could have intervened decided their interests mattered more than his life. What remains after the truth? When the full investigation results were released to the public in late 2025, the world stopped to listen. News networks dedicated entire broadcasts to the findings. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from rage to grief to vindication. Millions who had suspected conspiracy for decades finally had confirmation, but the validation came wrapped in heartbreak. Knowing the truth did not ease the pain. It made everything worse because it revealed just how preventable Tupac's death had been. Fans gathered outside the Las Vegas courthouse, where investigators held their press conference. Some carried signs demanding justice. Others held candles and played Tupac's music through speakers. Tears flowed freely. Strangers embraced. The crowd was multiracial and multi-generational, proof of how deeply Tupac's voice had penetrated culture. For them, this was not just about solving a celebrity assassination. It was about validating their intuition that something evil had been hidden and finally being heard after 3 decades of being called conspiracy theorists. Tupac's family received the news with mixed emotions. His sister, Tupac Shakur, spoke publicly about feeling relief and devastation simultaneously. Relief that the truth was no longer buried. Devastation that her brother's trust had been so thoroughly betrayed. She talked about how their mother, Afeni, had passed away without knowing what really happened, how that ignorance haunted Afeni's final years. Now the family had answers, but the people they wanted to hold accountable were mostly dead or beyond legal reach due to statutes of limitations. The music industry reacted with nervous silence. Major labels issued carefully worded statements expressing sympathy without admitting any systemic failures. Behind closed doors, lawyers scrambled to assess liability. Former Death Row Records executives either refused to comment or disappeared from public view. A few retired industry insiders gave anonymous interviews admitting that exploitation and dangerous business practices were common in the 90s, but insisting things had changed. Artists and activists were not convinced. They pointed out that young musicians still signed predatory contracts, still faced pressure to maintain manufactured feuds, and still struggled to own their work. Legal proceedings began, but moved slowly. Some suspects identified in the investigation had passed on years earlier. Others invoked their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. The conspiracy involved so many people across so many institutions that prosecutors struggled to build cases that would hold up in court. Proving who pulled the trigger was easier than proving who gave the orders. Even with all the evidence collected, justice remained complicated and incomplete. What emerged most powerfully was reflection on what the world lost when Tupac passed away. He was not just a rapper. He was a poet, actor, activist, and philosopher who spoke for people society ignored. His lyrics addressed poverty, police brutality, systemic racism, and the struggles of survival with honesty that made listeners feel seen. He challenged both street violence and institutional oppression. He refused to be categorized or controlled. At 25, he was still evolving, still learning, still growing. Imagine what he could have created with another 30 years. Music changed after his death, but not for the better. The raw political consciousness that defined 90s hip-hop faded. Labels pushed safer, more commercial sounds. Artists learned that being too controversial, too activist, too independent could be dangerous. Tupac's assassination sent a message that resonated through the industry. Stay in your lane or suffer consequences. Some artists continued speaking truth regardless, but many chose self-preservation. The culture lost some of its fearlessness the night Tupac passed on. Documentaries and books examining the new findings flooded the market. Some focused on the investigation details. Others explored broader questions about power, corruption, and who decides which voices get silenced. Film directors announced plans for movies telling the real story. Tupac's music saw a massive resurgence in streaming. New generations discovered his work and understood why their parents called him legendary. His relevance had never truly faded, but the truth added new dimensions to his art.